spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scarish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to give you some spooky things.
We're going to give people spooky things or
No,
spooky
like
information?
we're going to give you some spooky information.
Right on. I'm pretty excited about this episode because it is so very close to Halloween. So what are you going to be covering this week, Robin?
So I am going to be covering the final topic of my season of serial killers, and it's going to be BTK.
Right on. I'm going to be covering Halloween in general, which I'm actually really, really excited to do.
You were very excited about it when you brought it up today.
It just kind of hit me recently. I was like, I should probably cover Halloween. And I got some good stuff for you folks. But I believe Robin's actually going to go first this episode. But before we get there, if you're one of those folks that's like, but I was hoping to hear some stories from my fellow listeners, those are called homegrown horrors. And we do those on the Storytime episodes. Robin, what is a homegrown horror exactly?
So homegrown horrors are the paranormal, supernatural, spiritual stories of things that have happened to you or your family members or your friends that you have generously shared with us so we can share with the rest of our spooky friends.
Indeed, and if you have a story like that, you can email storytime@scarish.com. We've had a lot of them in this past week. It's always really fun when we get an influx of emails, and you can also go to scarish.com, which is our website, and click on Contact Us. If you do that, fill out that form and send it our way. It comes into our email inbox, and you can also hit us up on any of our social media platforms. We have Facebook, which is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. We have Twitter, which is @scarishpod, and we have Instagram, which is @scarishpodcast. So feel free to send us a message, and if you have a story that you'd like to tell us but you don't want us to share it, just let us know, and we will be more than happy to just engage you in a dialogue and let you know. In most cases, all you're really looking to hear is, you know what, I'm not crazy, and you're not crazy. So yeah, go ahead and send them our way. But for this show, we're going to go ahead and jump into topics. So Robin, take it away.
All right, so I'm going to hit up this final serial killer for this season, and it's a pretty famous one. I think BTK is pretty famous, right?
I've heard of BTK, and I haven't really heard of a ton of serial killers. So yeah, I think BTK is famous.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the last one because I know last episode I was like, oh, it's the last one for the season.
And then I let you know that Halloween was still over a week away.
I really got excited for Halloween, so I totally forgot that there's another episode before Halloween.
You're trying to fast forward to your birthday.
Yeah.
Because Robin's a spooky birthday. Her birthday's Halloween, if you didn't know.
Yes. So the subject today is Dennis Lynn Rader, also known by his self-given name.
What a douche.
Yeah, what a douche. BTK. So his name stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, which is spoilers.
Horrific.
It's horrific, and definitely a spoiler as to what he does.
It's like that Dana Carvey joke from the 90s where he's like, do you think that Sting from The Police just named himself that and had to remind all his friends? Like, excuse me, would you mind calling me Sting?
Who names themselves that?
I don't know, but who names themselves BTK? It's just so self-serving and douchey. But, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into things that are even more crimes against humanity than him giving himself a shitty nickname.
Luckily, I didn't go into a lot of detail for a lot of things because he did some gross stuff. But we're going back to America for this one. This is an American serial killer. I think most of the ones I've covered are American this season.
Yeah, except
for that one Russian, right? And this one is from Wichita, Kansas. Dennis Rader was born March 9th, 1945, one of 4 sons to a Dorothy. It's Dorothea. So I don't know if it's Dorothea or
like
Dorothy.
Dorothea, yeah.
Yeah, so Dorothea May Cook and a William Elvin Rader. And his childhood seems to follow the how to make a murder 101 type, archetype. And not with the whole abuse thing. They're not really sure about that in his childhood. But their parents worked long hours and didn't give enough needed attention to their children. And they had 4 sons. You know what I mean? Rader later described having felt like he was specifically ignored by his mother in particular and resented her for it. He also happened to find joy in the torture, killing, and hanging of small animals.
It's just so horrific to do that to small animals.
Yeah, it's just, but that's such a big sign.
I get there's multiple signs, but that one to me is the biggest standout. It's like not bedwetting so much, but like torturing and murdering small animals is just so horrific.
Weren't we talking to our friends this past weekend where we were
Saturday.
talking about there's like a database of people that have been...
I think the FBI just changed it so that if you abuse or torture a small animal, you go into an FBI database so that they can track it because it's such a common trait amongst serial killers.
It's so... Oh, I can't imagine hurting an animal. I love animals so much. They're so cute. So growing up, Rader had sadistic sexual fantasies about torturing, quote-unquote, trapped and helpless women. And the title BTK seems an appropriate name for this weird, sick obsession he has with doing that. He claimed that he, quote, knew somewhere along the line of 8th grade or freshman in high school that he had some abnormal tendencies at that point in time.
Oh,
end
you
quote.
think? A little bit? Yeah. Murdering and torturing small animals is the tip-off on that one?
He would cut out photos of women and draw ropes and gags on them and then fantasize about that. It seemed kind of like throughout the whole murdering spree type thing, he would take pictures and he would get more satisfaction out of the pictures than he did the actual act. So he's more of a, I don't know, visual learner.
But like through pictures and not through the actual thing? That's so bizarre.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting.
It's like he needs a filter so that he can shield himself one layer from the actuality of the horrible things that he's doing.
Yeah, so he acted these fantasies out through voyeurism. He would cross-dress and then autoerotic asphyxiation.
That is where you suffocate yourself, right? Okay.
Yeah, but get off on it.
Right. The belt thing. The belt around the neck.
Okay. I mean, there's other ways, but all right. So he would go and spy on his neighbors while he himself was dressed in stolen women's clothing and would masturbate while he had ropes tied around his arms and neck.
I think these are definite signs that there's something a bit amiss with this man.
Yeah. It's an unbelievable thing that you would go and do that, but it was a thing and he went and did that. Despite these deviant sexual urges, those around him knew him as friendly and polite.
Wow.
So he was a nice person overall, I guess. He was even a member of Christ Lutheran Church and was elected as the president of the church council at one point.
So many of these guys are charismatic and wind up holding positions of power.
He was also a Cub Scout leader.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's scary.
So he went to Kansas Wesleyan University, but dropped out after a year because he just couldn't keep his grades up. He spent 4 years in the United States Air Force between 1966 and 1970. And then after leaving the Air Force, he worked in the meat department of an IGA supermarket. I have never been to one.
I've never even heard of one.
Yeah, it apparently is a big thing because I was looking it up and it's just not on this part of the U.S. So at this IGA supermarket, it was his mother happened to be the bookkeeper. So maybe she helped him get a job there.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those things where you know.
On May 22nd, 1971, he married a Paula Dietz, who he met through the church because she was a bookkeeper at the church. And
so she carried his mother's job at a church. There's like nothing more wholesome that a family could want their son to like be interested in.
And proposed to her after a few dates.
Dates?
Yeah,
wow.
after a few dates. And they had 2 children together.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there is someone out there for everyone.
He then went on to attend Butler County Community College, from which he earned a degree in electronics in 1973 when he was 28 years old. And when I read that, I was just like, what is a degree in electronics? It's just so generalized. And I feel like these days, it's like, I have a degree in how this vintage of wine should taste in XYZ conditions.
Because everything is super specific nowadays? Okay, I see what
it's just so insane. But a degree in electronics, it's like you have maybe an electrician's degree or something. But
I mean, I think when did this take place? When did he get his degree?
1973.
Yeah, I think it was just a general, like, if you know some electronics,
like a handyman type
you
thing?
must know all electronics type of thing, where it's like you must know like motorized engines and probably some low voltage stuff and some high voltage stuff, therefore you're an expert, you know? Versus now where you have to be super specific into what you know.
Right. Rader went on from getting that degree from the community college to enroll at Wichita State University, where he graduated in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in administration of justice.
Wow.
It's just so ironic. How do you even...
He probably studied it so he knew how he could get away with
stuff. After college, he worked as an assembler for the Coleman Company, which I thought was really interesting. And the Coleman Company is that company that makes all those camping supplies that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. I know I've used a lamp or two from them. They make tents, things like that.
Tents, sleeping bags.
Yeah.
They make a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so he worked as an assembler for that company. Now, this guy kind of walks the fine line between regular Joe Schmo jobs. The fact that he ended up working for ADT Security Services. So he studied administration of justice, but then he also has a degree in just electronics. And then he works as an assembler or in a meat department, and then he works for ADT. It's like he's trying to pile on stuff to get away with things later on.
ADT is something that kind of creeps me out. Like he's in charge of securing people's homes.
So what he did is he worked for ADT, and it kind of gave him the knowledge to disable the systems because he would go around and install these systems between 1974 and 1988 for homeowners that were getting them specifically because they were afraid of BTK.
Wow, that is so fucking bizarre.
And no one knew. No one knew. They just let this dude into their house to set up these security systems, and it's just so crazy.
It's creepy is what it is. It's like the person that you turn to for help is just like so happy you're turning to him because turns out he was the bad guy all along.
Pretty much. And then after the ADT job, he got a regular Joe Schmo job again doing dog catching. So he was a dog catcher in May of 1991.
So he turned into Ace Ventura? Or no, he turned into the guy who would like catch dogs and take them to the pound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So apparently he had complaints of having bullied and harassed single women, and one neighbor even complained that he killed her dog for no reason.
Wow.
So this guy just making friends in all the right places. Not really. So about the murders. Let's head back into 1974. So January 15th, 4 members of the Otero family were found murdered in Wichita, Kansas. And it was Joseph and Julie Otero and then 2 of their children. Their eldest son, Charlie, found them when he came home from school, and he was only in 10th grade, so he's still horrible. A baby.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that is a trademark of BTK are his letters, and he wrote letters to taunt police about his murders and described the murders. And the murder of the Oteros was described in detail in a letter that was found stuffed into an engineering book that was found at the Wichita Public Library. So he would put these things in random places for people to find them.
That's bizarre. I figured he would leave them at the murder scene.
No. So he would, I'll tell you later about all these different packages he would leave at places. And so during interviews after his arrest, he admitted to being totally unprepared for the murders of the Oteros. And he didn't understand how hard it would be to actually kill somebody. How can you even the logic with that?
It's like he had to put himself in a mindset where he thought it would be easier.
Right.
So that he wouldn't be afraid of doing it. I wonder if he was even afraid of doing it or he was afraid of getting caught, you know?
Yeah.
I really wonder about that when it comes to people like serial killers was there ever a time where they were worried about the consequences of their actions based off of the fact that it was horrific or just based off the fact that they would suffer like an actual consequence, you know, not the morality of it, but you might get caught and go to jail.
Well, that's why they're psychopaths.
Yeah, but I've met people who like literally will tell you straight up, the only reason I don't do horrific things is because there's consequences for those actions beyond me feeling bad, because they wouldn't feel bad. And they have wives and kids, and it's super fucking creepy to hear people say stuff like that, because it's like, I've heard people say that stuff like that who, you know, go to church every Sunday.
That's weird.
And it's really, really terrifying to think that, like, if that mindset overlaps with more people than you think, like, it's just, there's no telling who could snap one day.
Yeah. In early 1978, Rader sent a letter to a local Wichita TV station, KKE. And in this letter, he took responsibility for the killings of the Oteros, as well as a Catherine Bright, a Shirley Vian, and a Nancy Fox. And this is also the letter that included names he'd call himself, with BTK being the most memorable. He also demanded media attention, which is probably why he sent it to the TV station, because they can obviously give him all the attention he wants, right?
Right.
The letter also announced that, hey, there's a serial killer going around, so pay attention to me. And in the letter, he claimed that what drove him to kill was this thing called Factor X, which is apparently some type of supernatural element that's also to blame for Jack the Ripper, Son of Sam, and the Hillside Strangler. And this is all the claims that he's making in this letter, right? And I'd never heard of this before, so that's new.
Yeah, I've never heard of that either.
But it's not an actual thing. So
you're saying that this serial killer is an unreliable narrator.
Right. I think it was his attempt at reasoning. After his arrest...
Somehow it's not his fault.
Right. After his arrest, he called it a demon, describing it as something that controls his desire to kill. And he depicted it as a frog, or like a more traditional idea of what a demon is. And this letter was just riddled with grammatical and spelling errors. It was strange because I think family members that had letters from him were like, man, you have the same spelling mistakes as BTK.
That's fucked up.
But no one put two and two together. It's so bizarre. The murder of Catherine Bright was only a few months after the Ortegas. He stabbed and strangled her and then stabbed her brother Kevin twice. But Kevin luckily survived. His wife, Rader's wife, was 3 months pregnant during this time. And that is supposedly what led him to take a few years off of murder.
Because he had a kid.
Because his wife was pregnant.
Wow. Well, I mean, and, the kid was born.
Well, yeah. On May 5th, 1985, Maureen Hedge, yes, that was her actual name. I could not believe it.
Maureen Hedge doesn't sound like a good name to you.
Maureen Hedge sounds like something you'd name in a movie, you know?
That's true.
So her body was found. Rader had broken into her home as she lived right down the street from him. And after her male friend left for the evening, Rader crept out of her closet, flipped on the lights. She sat up in bed only for him to pounce on her and strangle her to death. He killed her in April. So I think the end of April he killed her, and then they found her body in May. So he took her body to the church that he was a president of the council for.
Wow.
He took photographs of her in various bondage positions at the freaking church. He had prepared to murder her at the church, I guess changed it up or something like that, but he had stored black plastic sheets and other materials. This whole plan he had for murdering at the church was called Project Cookie, which is so weird. But
such a terrible name, too.
Yeah, but he ended up, I think, tossing her body into a ditch. So, took all the pictures he wanted, got rid of it. He had a very specific MO, obviously, because he is called BTK, right? So he would...
I kept confusing it with HBK, which is, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, which Robin over here was like, who? And I was like, oh, Andrew will be so disappointed in you right now. So many of our listeners will be.
Yeah, I don't know who the Heartbreak Kid is. I'm like, Stone Cold Steve Austin, I know that person.
I mean, he had a rivalry with HBK for a while.
Really?
Yeah, it ended with a Stone Cold Stunner.
That's hilarious. Badass. All right, so...
Mike Tyson was the referee. I know it doesn't matter. Keep going.
Anyway, so he'd stalk victims, he'd learn their routine, and then he'd kill them when the opportunity arose. His final victim was Dolores E. Davis, who he murdered January 19th, 1991, and whose body was found 2 weeks later. He also intended to kill others, but they were lucky enough to thwart his attempts. During police interviews after his arrest, he stated, quote, "There are a lot of lucky people," end quote.
That's fucking terrifying.
That's super terrifying, because that means he did try to kill a whole bunch of different people.
Or he had plans to kill other people and something happened that didn't allow it to go through. Can you imagine how many times in your life you've maybe been in the same area or vicinity as a serial killer, let alone been a potential target of a murderer where some seeming innocuous act of the world just existing prevented your death or demise?
Whenever I'm walking alone in parking structures and things like that, I'm very, very paranoid because those are just scary places to walk alone. So folks out there, please, please, please do not walk alone if you can help it, especially at night in parking structures or parking lots or whatever. Walk in pairs or walk to one car together. Hop in, drive the other person to the other car.
Unless that person's a killer, in which case don't get in the car, whatever you do.
Right. That's true, too. All right, so one such person that was lucky was an Anna Williams. After stalking Williams, he broke in and waited for her, and he waited hours. But by 10 p.m., she never arrived because she was out with friends. He left. And when she got back, finally, she noticed her bedroom door was open when she had it closed. So she called the police. The police came. The police found a wire that was shaped into a noose that was right next to her bed.
Wow. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
so she was very, very lucky. She never stayed in that house ever again afterwards. I wouldn't either. She was like, I think she was 63 or something like that. She was an older woman. A few months after the break-in, Williams's daughter went to go pick up the mail, and in the mail they found a letter that was addressed to Anna's deceased husband, care of Anna.
Wow.
So specifically weird. Inside were a pair of pantyhose and a drawing of what Rader had intended to do to her. This guy is just...
So even though he wasn't able to do this to her, he still like left his
tortured
creepy
her.
letter behind.
Yeah. This mental torture that he might not have hurt her in any way physically, but that is scary to have to live through.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 1988, after the murders of 3 members of the Fager family in Wichita, a letter was received from someone claiming to be BTK. And this letter denied having any affiliation to the Fager murders, but stated that whoever the killer was had done quote-unquote admirable work.
Good Lord.
This letter was proven to have been, in fact, Rader after he was arrested in 2005. So he's considered completely scot-free of these particular murders, that he didn't do it.
Just because he wrote a letter.
He wrote a letter,
he didn't do it?
yes. And I'm
What
sure they don't have.
horseshit.
I'm sure they don't have any evidence of it though, too.
It might not fit his MO, or just might be something that he has an alibi for, but still, man, like, if all it takes is writing a letter saying, like, I really enjoyed the work here, but it wasn't me, it just seems weird.
He did take pictures of all the crime scenes that he was, present for. So, anyway, so initially, the BTK murders were thought to be a cold case, because how do you figure out who did it when they're random people, There's nothing specific really connecting them together.
I was going to say, you mentioned that he got caught in 2005, and you mentioned that this stuff began in the 70s. That's like 30 years. I can't imagine being a police officer or an FBI agent who's attached to some sort of investigation for BTK.
For 30 years.
And then being like, oh shit, he's back,
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine that feeling of realizing, like, a prolific serial killer has started to kill again?
Yeah, but in 2005, there's way more technology now.
Well, yeah, obviously.
So once Rader started communicating with local media, things kind of started falling into place for his eventual arrest. In March 2004, the Wichita Eagle received a letter from what was labeled to be a Bill Thomas Killman. That was the return address person on it. The author took credit for the murder of a Vicky Wedgerly on September 16th, 1986. And even included photos of the crime scene and a photocopy of her driver's license that they'd stolen from the crime scene.
Holy shit.
Wedgerly's autopsy provided investigators with evidence not previously available. So they found DNA under her fingernails, and they took that DNA and tested it against hundreds of men. Supposedly around 1,300 samples were taken and later destroyed by court order. So I'm sure it was something where they weren't allowed to do all that.
Maybe they weren't allowed to retain the evidence or something like that once the purpose had been filled. I don't know.
Who knows? And I mean, someone does know. Please tell us why. In May of 2004, KAKE received a letter describing, quote unquote, the BTK story. So in this letter, it was just a whole bunch of things about, hey, you should make this book titled The BTK Story. And there was a word puzzle included. There were a whole bunch of fake IDs, like a bunch of identifications.
Was it one of those word puzzles where it's like a word search, where it's like the first 3 things you find will be your fortune in the next year?
I can't.
I always specifically look for like balls. But
you have to do the first ones you see.
I just keep my eyes moving until I see BALZ or LLZ or LS or LLS.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, on June 9th, 2004, so March was the first letter at the Wichita Eagle, then May, 2 months later, June the next month, a package is found taped to a stop sign at the corner of 1st and Kansas in Wichita. So this package is taped to a random stop sign, okay? And it included descriptions of the Otero murders and a sketch labeled, quote, "The sexual thrill is my bill," end quote. What the fuck?
Fucking douchebag.
It also included a chapter list for the proposed book, The BTK Story. And chapter 1 was titled "A Serial Killer is Born." It's just, why? Why?
Super desperate for attention.
July, the next month, another package. And this time it's dropped in the return slot of a public library. This one contained the confession to the murder of a 19-year-old Jake Allen in Argonia, Kansas, that had happened earlier that month. But Allen's death was ruled a suicide, so he's cleared of that one too.
It's weird when someone confesses who is a serial killer like this, and for whatever reason, it doesn't connect.
Right. During the cooling off periods between murders, he would take pictures of himself in women's clothing, and he would bind himself up and pretend to be one of his victims and take pictures of himself. He even stored some of these photos in the basement of his church. Like, this guy is absolutely ridiculous. I can't even, you know? So after his arrest in February of 2005, he admitted to a lot during his investigation. So he admitted to having planned another murder set for October of 2004, having stalked his intended victim. And in October 2004, a manila envelope was dropped into a UPS box in Wichita, and it contained cards decorated with images of horror and bondage of children, which is so messed up.
That's super fucked
up. It
up.
also included a poem threatening the life of a particular investigator and a false autobiography of Rader's life. In December of 2004, another package was received by Wichita police, and this one was found in Murdoch Park. So you see how I'm telling you, like, they're all randomly placed. There's no specific place that
when
it's
they're
dropped
finding
at.
these things, do they release to the public that they're finding them each time, or are they keeping it kind of hidden? Because for a guy that seems so hell-bent on attention, and he keeps saying, like, you should write an autobiography, or you should publish this autobiography, or you should write a book about me.
Yeah.
It seems like the most annoying thing you could do to someone like that is to just not release any of this information, but then you worry about whether or not it's going to cause them to go kill someone for attention,
right,
or just turn themselves in.
Well, I know information did become available to the public later, obviously, because we're talking about it now. I just don't know the specifics of when it was released.
Right on.
Okay, so the one they found in Murdoch Park, it included the license of a Nancy Fox and a doll that had its hands and feet bound and a plastic bag tied over its head. So it's kind of taunting police and showing them, this is what I do, you know? In his letters to police, Rader asked about floppy disks. So now it's 2004 now, you know what I mean? More technology. So he asked the police about floppy disks. He wanted to know if they could use the floppy disks and trace them back to him, right? What a stupid question. Why would you ask the police that? Google it, okay? Anyway, police answered the question.
He just clearly wants to be caught at this point. He's like, is this a way you could catch me?
No, I think he got lazy and he didn't want to keep writing letters, you know?
He's like
I want to type shit now.
He has writer's block at this point. He's like, oh, whatever.
So police answered the question via a newspaper ad and said that a floppy would be safe to use. Now, I don't know if you folks remember floppies, but they held megabytes. They didn't hold a lot of information. And you know how songs these days it's like songs these days require at least 3 megs? You could not put that on a floppy disk. You couldn't put one song on a floppy disk. Do you remember those little things they used to sell at McDonald's that had like 30 seconds of a song on them, the little microchips?
No, I totally don't remember
Really?
that.
Okay, so you'd buy a little player at McDonald's, and then you'd have to buy the songs separately. And the songs...
A Mick player.
Sure, you could call it a Mick player. But there were these little chips that only had like 30 seconds of the song on them. So it was like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. And you could only hear 30-second clips, so you'd keep playing the clip over and over.
Wow, I don't remember this at all.
Oh my gosh, technology back in the day, guys. You guys are so lucky that now we have iPods.
I am 34. I'm not that old, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, like, I remember being a kid and putting, like, I can't remember the size of them, but they're like 5.5 by 7, like floppy
They're
discs.
5-inch floppies, yeah.
They're super big, and you'd have to. They look like a really thin square record that you'd slide into your computer.
These aren't even the diskettes, the 3-inch diskettes.
Yeah.
These are the 5-inch real floppy
And we'd
disks.
slide it in and go into DOS and type in a command, and it would start up a game, and it was Terminator. I remember very well that we used to play Terminator on my computer, and now it's like everything we could do on a computer can basically fit on a thumb drive that you can buy from probably Best Buy for $5.
Yeah, it's insane.
I remember my mom getting a work computer and being told by the guy who was selling it to her after we built it, I gave you a 2 gigabyte hard drive. You can never fill that.
Oh my gosh.
It's like if you saw one of my hard drives that I have now,
that's like one season of anime that you download.
You would be shocked and disgusted, but shocked.
Like, I just remember struggling with internet. You know how internet was like, oh man, when my house got DSL, I was like, DSL's the sweetest thing. The guy downloaded iTunes and he's like, check how fast this installs iTunes. I was like, whoa.
I remember when we upgraded from 56K to cable internet, and it was just like, boosh, like my fucking head exploded. Like, I can do all the things I've always wanted to do now. It's amazing.
It was, oh my gosh.
Let's get back to talking about this horrific, prolific serial killer.
Anyway, okay, back to the floppy disk, right? So,
and not the amazing innovations of technology in our lifetime.
In January of 2005, Rader attempted to leave a cereal box in the bed of a truck at a Home Depot in Wichita. So that's pretty random, choosing a random truck bed to put it in, right? The truck owner just saw the box and then chucked it.
It's like, get the fuck out of my
I mean, I would do that too. If I saw a random box, I'd be like, this isn't my box, fuck it.
I would think this is a bomb, and I'd throw it on my car.
So Rader went to retrieve it from the trash after he asked the owner of the truck, like, what'd you do with it? Like, how creepy is that, right? So he went to go get it out of the trash can. Luckily for authorities, security footage showed a black Jeep Cherokee leave the box in the truck bed. So they had video evidence. In February of 2005, postcards were sent to KAKE, and then another cereal box. It was left in a rural location and contained another bound doll. On February 26, 2005, Rader sent in a purple 1.44 megabyte Memorex floppy to Fox TV.
Wow. So during this time, he's not killing, he's just taunting
about the fact that he's killed people.
And he's gotten away with it to this point.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he sent the floppy disk. He also enclosed a letter and a gold necklace with a large medallion on it. He also included a copy of the cover of Rules of Prey, which is a 1989 novel about a serial killer. So he's just taunting people, but he wants all the credit and he wants people to
give him accolades and to do all this stuff to show how great he was.
Unfortunately for him, with new technology, police were able to find metadata embedded in a deleted Microsoft Word document that was still on the floppy. Probably why it's important to format
Always
shit.
Format your floppy disks, people.
Oh my gosh, I can't stand when kids are like the save button, because you're like, oh, it's the little floppy disk.
They're like, what is that? Or when you say
goodness.
tape it, when you say tape something, and they're like, I don't have any tape. What do you mean tape it? It's like, record it. I fucking hate you.
Anyway, okay. So, the floppy disk, that deleted Microsoft Word document, it contained the words Christ Lutheran Church. And it was marked last modified by Dennis. So it had the person that edited it and a location.
Bummer.
So all the police had to do was Google it. So they Googled the name and the church, and they came up with Dennis Rader. And thanks to the internet, they were able to...
Good thing no one else worked at that church named Dennis, because they would have had some really awkward interviews with police.
They were able to match the black Jeep Cherokee to Rader's Jeep that was parked outside his house. So they were like, okay, we have our guy. These things match together. In order to arrest Rader, though, they needed more evidence. So a weird thing that they did was they got a warrant to test the DNA of a pap smear that his daughter got at Kansas State University Medical Clinic when she was enrolled there.
Wow.
How do they even know? It's just such a strange request, and I can't believe that they even thought of that, you know? I just want to know if you folks know how they figure these things out and like step by step to this point where they're like, yeah, I get the warrant for a pap smear information thing, you know?
You can send that information to Robin's direct email address.
Right? Anyway, the DNA was a familial match to the DNA that they found under Wedgerly's fingernails. Remember that case?
Yep.
Yeah, so arrest. You know, they have the DNA evidence now. They have video evidence. They can match the truck or the Jeep, whatever, and they can go arrest him. So Rader was arrested while driving near his home in Park City shortly after noon on February 25th, 2005. He was arrested, and when asked by an officer if he knew why he was getting arrested, he replied, quote, "Oh, I have a suspicions why," end quote. What?
What is he, Squirrely fucking Dan from Letterkenny?
I know. When I read that, I was like, he's Squirrely Dan. His home and
Squirrely Dan gone bad.
His home and vehicle were searched by Wichita Police, Kansas Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and ATF. ATF, by the way, if you folks didn't know, is Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which is why, to me, ATF has always been explosives. I did not realize it meant any of the other things.
For me, it was always alcohol, tobacco, and firearm. I had no idea till
Really?
this moment that explosives were included because it's not part of their abbreviation.
Oh, to me,
and that's
ATF's
stupid.
always been explosives.
For me, it's because I saw Jackie Brown, and it's an ATF guy hunting a guy who sells guns.
Oh.
ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. These are controlled things that you cannot sell. Only the government and people who have licenses can sell them.
Okay, cool.
And apparently explosives, too, are part of that. I figured that would fall under a different jurisdiction, but apparently I'm wrong.
So they found a whole bunch of evidence. Rader had every photo he'd taken at the crime scenes. So it's like, this is all the evidence. They have all these pictures. You're not going to get away with it. So on February 28th, 2005, Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. Rader only confessed to the 10 that he was charged with. So he wasn't like, I killed X amount of people other than this, like a bunch of the other serial killers that we've covered. Bail was set at $10 million, so there was no way he's getting out of that one.
Shit.
Rader pled guilty, making no attempts at apologies to any of the victims' families. He showed typical psychopathic behavior, showing an inability to understand the emotion of the situation. He just kept talking about himself. He was sentenced on August 18th with 10 consecutive life sentences, which is a minimum of 175 years. There was no death penalty available in the state of Kansas at the time, so he got out of that one. He's in solitary confinement for his own protection, apparently. So that was weird. I
can only imagine a psychopath who's also a serial killer being locked in solitary confinement indefinitely.
So,
what does that do to that bizarre mind?
Just now he can think all about himself. But he doesn't, apparently. Anyway, investigators were going back to all these other unsolved cases and were trying to match those unsolved cases with the BTK because later on they did have the death penalty. So they were like, if we can match these cases to BTK, then we can actually send him to the chair or whatever, injection.
The chair at the chamber.
Yeah. So unfortunately, they couldn't find anything. So nothing they could do to connect the cases at all. After his arrest, but prior to his conviction on July 26th, 2005, his wife was granted an emergency divorce. So she was married to him.
I think she qualifies for that.
She was married to him this whole time. That is what is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And what it comes down to is this man had grandiose ideas of himself, but he was just an average Joe. You know, he's just a normal person. He had regular people jobs. He lived a normal life. He had a normal family. He just wanted all this media attention and all this fame. And he said he got off on people fearing him and his reputation. And the fear that people had when they heard his name, BTK, he just got off on it.
Which is why he tried to bring himself back into the spotlight again.
Right.
Was like, you should talk about this so people can be afraid of me again.
Yeah. I mean, no one's afraid of the name Dennis, okay? Dennis is not scary.
Some dentist out there is like, oh.
You don't want to be scary, Dennis. You want to be that sweet guy that everybody wants to be with.
Dennis? I fucking love Dennis. That's what you want to be.
The sad part is he was supposedly a really, really great dad. He was proud of his kids, And
sounds like the inspiration for Prodigal Son, that new show on Fox,
Aww.
which is probably dating this episode because by now, whenever you're listening to this, it could be Tuesday. It's probably fucking canceled because that show looks like garbage.
Really?
I don't think it looks good.
But not Michael Sheen. I'm sorry.
I just think at some point it's like that show The Slap, where it's like, okay, the slap happened, now what? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we get it. He's a serial killer's son and he's an investigator. So how long does this like trick last in this show before you have to like move past it? And if you do, will it be good?
It's like Stalker. Stalker was really good to me.
But they could have just kept doing stalking case. I'm just pissed they canceled Stalker. It's
it's
just all about
Stalker.
a very specific crime that is not constantly covered. And I thought it was good. Whatever.
Yeah, let's start a hashtag bring back Stalker, okay?
I love Dylan McDermott, right? And Maggie Q.
Yeah, and Maggie Q. I love her.
I do too.
Anyway, so if you...
She got her start being a stunt double on Jackie Chan movies and shit. It's pretty awesome.
If you folks are interested, in 2019, so this year, his daughter, Carrie Rawson, released a book titled A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming.
Wow.
In this book, she wrote of growing up with her father and then trying to understand his life after he was arrested. And apparently, she had lost faith for a while, and then she had a freak accident and she almost died. And it was something like that where she lost faith, and her dad is the one that kind of brought faith back into her. So I don't want to read the book, but I'm sure some people out there are like, oh yeah, I'd be interested in reading that book. I'm sure someone's actually
already read this book out there.
So I mean,
I'm sure at least I'm gonna go ahead and put an over/under on this book of 5 times that the phrase "the Lord works in mysterious ways" is in this book. So I'm gonna take the over on that too.
Okay. But yeah, that is the story of the BTK killer.
It's just bizarre. I didn't realize he spent so much time taunting the police after he had like committed and got away with almost all of his crimes.
Yeah.
God, that's just horrific. Fun stuff. Okay.
Yeah, let's finish off with something fun. You have something fun, I hope, right?
I do indeed. So last year around this time, I actually covered Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. And it was fun since it was a tradition that I had seen, but I'd never really dug into or participated in. So learning about it was super fun. And it's an amazing holiday that I'll eventually participate in, but typically I participate in Halloween celebrations. And it occurred after recording that episode and again this week that although I celebrate it, I really don't know a whole lot about Halloween. And while that would be a really fun topic to just cover the origins of Halloween, and it is what I'm covering, I also have a nice amount of stuff that has happened on Halloween. So it's not just a creepy book report, it's a creepy book report with murder.
I like that your pinky is up.
I'm glad that you call that out, because other people can't see that. And other horrific things besides murder. And let's just jump right in. So, what is Halloween? Well, this is Halloween. I literally have it written in my script because I knew that you would do that. Also, we can only sing those 3 words or I'm pretty sure Disney will sue us.
Oh my gosh.
Side note, not really. Side note, maybe. You never know with Disney. But for cereals, where the F did Halloween come from? Now, I know where Hocus Pocus said it come from.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because that's where my origin always goes to, is that bullshit that Allison spits at the beginning of that movie, and she says that it's really based off of an old feast called All Hallows Eve. And my question is that true? And is Max, in fact, a stupid asshole for saying it was invented by the candy companies? Well,
he is a stupid asshole.
Let's break these things up. First, yes, Max is a stupid asshole, as he proves throughout that movie, because a new kid to the town talking shit about his new town and his new teacher and his classmates in the middle of class, that is what's called a stupid asshole move.
Bonehead move.
Just a bonehead move. So is All Hallows Eve the origin of Halloween? Well, kind of, but not really. So there was actually a much older tradition that came from the Celts, and you may have heard of it, and you've probably heard it mispronounced or seen it somewhere and mispronounced it when you read it, and it's spelled Samhain.
Samhain?
That's how I always said it whenever I saw it, but it's pronounced Samhain.
What?
Samhain is how you say it. That's why I kept hitting play on it, and you're like, what's that sound? And I was like, oh, it was just me back here trying to figure out how to say this word. So Samhain was celebrated starting on October 31st by the Celts, and it would actually be celebrated into November 1st. Because if you aren't partying past midnight, you ain't doing it right. And I'm pretty sure that's a Celtic rule that exists to this fucking day.
Wait, what?
If you aren't partying past midnight, you ain't doing it right.
Wow.
And hashtag that, but it's really long. So anyways.
That's ridiculous.
The Celts considered November 1st to be their new year, and October 31st was officially the end of summer and the end of harvest for them, and November 1st was the beginning of winter.
Today was the end of summer. Oh my god.
Leading it all the way towards that, winter is coming. And winter to them meant death. Because realistically, look at this from their perspective. It's over 2,000 years ago. They don't have any electricity or heating like we know it.
Yeah, who's going to save them from the fucking Dragon Queen?
I mean, she has fire, so it'd probably be kind of nice for her to warm them up. Or warm them up like she warmed up Jon Snow.
Ooh, snap.
Anyways, the Celts were mainly from Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France. And to give you an idea of the weather, I'm going to do something I should do more often and I should have done in my lifetime up to this point. So being an American, when I hear about stuff in Europe or Asia or other continents, I constantly try and figure out what city I can compare it to in America, either whether it's population or climate. And basically, how high up on my side of the world would those locations be kept running through my head. And I was like, well, you're an idiot. There's these things called latitude lines. You can just look that up. And England is on the 55th parallel. And you know what else on our side of the world is on the 55th parallel? Alaska and Canada. So what's shocking to me about that is I always think of England, and for some reason, I know it's like hazy, you know, it has overcast a lot, but I never think of it being like really cold. I've seen like movies or TV where like the winter hits and it's snowing, and I just imagine it's like the winters that I grew up with. But no, it's much further north than I grew up. And what's really funny about that is a lot of these places where the Celts were is further north than England. And if I know anything about the winter from where I'm from, and I try and go further north, the winter will kill you. Like, I'm from right outside Chicago, born and raised, and the winters there can get to around -10 pretty often. Like, once winter actually settles in, like, you're going to get negative digits. Last year with that polar vortex that hit, it was like -40 to -50. There was a point where it was 60 degrees in Las Vegas and -40 where I originally am from, which is a difference of 100 degrees, which is bizarre to think about, okay?
I think it was kind of like 98 degrees, because I love that band.
So much. So Chicago, where this happened, is on the 42nd parallel, okay? The 42nd. The higher the number, the higher up on the planet it is. Northern France, which is like the southernmost point that someone who's in the Celtic religion who's doing this could live, is on the 45th parallel. So basically, anyone who's part of this Celtic religion celebrating the end of summer, the end of their year, moving into winter, is in a scenario where they're about to move into a season that will most likely kill some of their friends or them, you know, or themselves or their family. So best case scenario as a Celt, Samhain was kind of a goodbye party. You just didn't know who for. So you were just going to get really turned up. Like, you were going to get really fucked up with these things. Vegas was 45 degrees this morning, and I almost set my car on fire for warmth.
Dude, I was filling up my gas, and I had a really big jacket on, and I had pants, I had boots on, and
Boots with the fur.
I was still, like, shivering, shaking in my boots. It was just so cold.
Anyone back in the Midwest listening to this is like, fudge you all, fudge you both.
I know.
I fudge and hate you.
I'm not used to it being that cold, considering yesterday, that time in the morning, it was like 70. So it's just it was a huge change in temperature, and it's something that I was not prepared for. Not even in the slightest.
Prepared. But because this time of year, which we are currently in while we're recording this, and because this time of year when they were entering what we'll call the kill zone was upon them, they believed that the last night of summer about to enter winter signified basically leaving the life cycle of the year and entering the death cycle of the year. And for whatever reason, that transition made the veil between the living and the dead blurry or thinned or weak. And they weren't like ghost tourists is what I like to call us nowadays, where everyone wants to have a supernatural or paranormal experience. They weren't like that back then. I mean, death was very real to them. They weren't like, oh my God, let's get out a Ouija board and talk to dead people. That's not what their parties were like. They weren't like, let's go to a haunted house so I can get my diddles twiddled in the dark.
What?
They were much more serious. They were like, yo, dogs, ghosts are coming out tonight, and they will fuck up all of our shit. They're bad luck. They're angry. They'll mess up our crops, and we need to keep them away. So they'd go and get the Celtic priests, who, by the way, are called druids, which is totally badass. And they would build a big-ass bonfire. And because the priests made it, it would essentially be a sacred bonfire. And they'd have them be really big. And apparently they'd have 4 separate bonfires throughout the year to signify transition through seasons and different things. But this one was really important. And as a side note, knowing that you celebrate Halloween with a bonfire, I feel like I've had a few Celtic Samhains myself. And
wow.
I drank a lot of that sacred fire, in fact, because when you have a bonfire and you're playing beer pong, the ashes of the fire rise, and then they fall down like it's raining ash, like you're by a volcano, and it all lands in your beer, and eventually you wind up having to drink it. That's just what happens. So I feel like maybe that's protected me throughout my life, but who knows? But that's not all they do. They'd burn some crops in that sacred bonfire, and they'd also sacrifice some animals to the gods. So this party was pretty awesome. If you think about it, basically they're bringing stuff to burn in the fire, and then they're having a cookout. I'm not sure if they're actually going to eat the meat or if they're just going to slaughter the goat or whatever and just say, like, please don't kill us in the winter. But it's not that crazy to think that this is what the tradition is. You know, we still kind of do stuff like this nowadays. We just don't always say it's like for the gods. It's like, I deep fry a turkey every Thanksgiving. It's not for the gods. It's because it's fucking delicious, you know? So they'd also wear costumes to scare off the ghosts. But where are you going to get a costume in like 2,000 years ago?
Skulls of animals?
Well, I'm just saying they're there already. There's dead animal skins and bones and skulls laying on the ground. So yeah, they would take the freshly sacrificed animal skin and their heads, and they'd wear them to ward off the evil spirits. And some folks, I mean, there's not going to be enough for everyone, so some folks would bring their own shit from home, maybe from last Samhain when you killed your favorite billy goat, and everyone would come dressed up to try and keep these spirits away. So you're kind of getting an idea of what this holiday seems to be like 2,000 years ago, which isn't all that different. So like the ghosts of the deceased would show up at these places and be like, good gods, like these people are messed up. Let's go somewhere else.
Oh my goodness.
So they would just leave them alone. And during Samhain, they would also tell each other's fortunes. Because with that thin veil, they thought it would help them figure out what was to come ahead. And this was very important to them. Because it wasn't just about telling fortunes for fun. It was really about trying to figure out how you could make it through the year or make it through the winter. And it wasn't just like one person telling fortunes. Basically, like everyone was doing it.
Yeah, everyone was doing it.
You know, there was like some party girl who was a Celt who got super wasted and had on like crooked goat ears because she was too hammered to fix them. And I was like, this year, Becky is going to be such a slut. She won't have any problem staying warm this winter.
Oh
and
my
someone
goodness.
else was like, oh my God, read my fortune now. And she was like, you're going to get the plague and die. Stay away from us. Because that was a thing. People would get the plague and die. And you know what else they would do? Before they left to go to Samhain celebration, before they got turned up, they were leaving the house, and they would put out the fire in their hearth at home. And I kid about not having the heating that we have, but what they did have was a hearth in their home that they would steadily feed wood into, or something that would burn to keep them warm through the winter. And for those of you who have never stayed in a place without heat that had a hearth in it, that was your primary and like only source of heat, it actually works pretty effing well. Like I used to go to Canada once a year, and that's what the cabins up there were. When you're in Canada, there's going to be 2 things you're going to get: frostbite or sunburn. I swear to God. And if it was really cold in the night, we had all this firewood, and it would make that cabin so toasty warm. It was amazing. So if this is so important and it's so effective, why would they put out their fire if the winter was coming and it was right upon them? Well, when they went to the party, they would party hard, they would eventually get partied out, and they'd go home. But before they'd leave, they'd go up to this big-ass bonfire that was still burning, and they'd light something on fire with it. And they would take that home, they'd take the sacred bonfire's flame back to their home and relight their hearth with it. So it was a way for them to take home this sacred flame as a way to hope that it would get them through this winter and see them through.
That's pretty cool.
I think it's awesome, to be honest with you. And like, I didn't know any of this shit. And it's like, what's really funny about it is like, once you light your hearth with the sacred flame, It's very much, and I think this is where the tradition of dads not wanting their thermostats fucked with. Like,
oh
never
my God.
let that fire go out until at the very least the winter is past and you don't have to worry about the air outside killing you because it's so cold. So it's pretty cool, though. And I could get really in depth on how this holiday translated all the way into our Halloween, but let's do the montage version of that, shall we? Because I think we're all at the point where we're like, that is cool, but let's get to the creepy stuff or the scary stuff. So fast forward a bit, the Roman Empire winds up in charge of all these Celtic lands starting around 50 AD, and they're in charge for like 400 years. And during that time, the local cultures start absorbing two Roman holidays that wound up kind of overlapping. The first
Christmas?
one is Feralia. No, it's not Christmas because we're talking about Halloween. I think I'm saying it right. I'm probably saying it wrong. And during Feralia, they would commemorate the passing of the dead, and it's also held in late October. And another late year holiday celebrating the goddess Pomona. The name of the holiday I couldn't quite find. But Pomona is the goddess of fruits and trees. Her symbol is an apple. Historians sincerely believe this is where the tradition of bobbing for apples came from.
What?
And that's why
really
it's
cool.
associated with something like Halloween. So
Never done
anyway,
it.
we're going to fast forward to 609 AD. So 609. The Pope of the time creates All Martyrs Day, and he sets the date for May 13th, which is obviously not Halloween time. But about 100 years later, the new Pope shows up and is like, I'm going to bump this thing up a notch. And he turns All Martyrs Day into All Saints Day, which it is still known as. And it includes more folks in the remembering aspect of the holiday, but he moves All Saints Day from May 13th to November 1st. 1000
Wow.
AD hits. It's the millennium, and they're like, we need a new fucking holiday! So they make All Souls Day, and they set the date for that for November 2nd. So anyone who remembers last year, yes, I did just give you the origin of the days for Dia de los Muertos.
Wow.
Those are those 3 days. And All Saints Day is November 1st. It is called, other than All Saints Day, All Hallows. And that celebrating of Samhain is still taking place on the 31st, but because people get so turned up, rather than calling it Samhain still, they're like, well, this is really like All Hallows Eve because it's the night before.
Oh, okay.
That is literally where All Hallows Eve comes from. And as time goes on, it becomes Halloween. That's what we know Halloween as. So that is what Allison was talking about in the beginning of Hocus Pocus. And eventually, we just all started doing this in all different parts of the world. Anyone that was a derivative of this religion that was celebrating this, which is pretty freaking cool. And the idea that the veil is thinnest on this day is still really prevalent across the board, even to this day. So trick-or-treating is something that actually wound up showing up in America in the late 1800s because All Hallows Eve had turned into this thing of mischief where people would fuck with each other basically and play pranks.
Okay.
Which isn't a great thing to do. And what's funny is like everyone's like, let's just start having parties where we celebrate. The kids can all get dressed up, and whoever has the best costume will basically give them candy because we don't want to give kids prizes or stuff like that. And then neighborhoods would start doing it, and they'd send kids to each other, and then it started being like a popular thing that was being done in other places. And the idea behind it was you wanted to party with your friends. And it's kind of funny because that was sort of the origin of the holiday to begin with, is you'd party with your friends to like basically say bye to each other and like everyone cross their fingers and hope they don't die.
Wow.
But now you don't have to do that anymore, so you're just going to go back to partying. And certain things about Halloween seem to pop up all the time since this sort of tradition has taken hold. And now we will transition from the history of Halloween into some of the stuff that is believed to take place on Halloween, and then some of the stuff that did take place on Halloween. So what are good examples of Halloween myths? Well, the first one that jumps to mind is poisoned candy, or razor blades and apples.
I wanted to cover this topic.
Which is what I kept getting told about when I was a kid, was there's going to be razor blades and apples. Only one fucking person ever gave me an apple. We cut it up. There was no razor blades in it. I was so disappointed. And the new one is edibles being given to children, especially in all the states that have legalized marijuana. It's like, that's not going to happen. Like black cats cursing you if they cross your path. And like the black cat thing really makes me mad because it's not just that they normally are supposed to curse you if they cross your path, but like on Halloween, they're like the embodiment of evil, of like a witch or the devil. So let's break these down one at a time. What's the truth? Well, first of all, black cats are not evil. They're amazing and lovable and adorable, and I love our black cat, and anyone who has a black cat will probably tell you the same thing. And our friend of the show, Mariana, has a black cat, and it's one of the most cuddliest cats I've ever seen. I wanted to put it in my luggage and take it home. So what's sickening to me is that people will actually hurt or kill black cats on Halloween if they find them out because of this stupid-ass superstition, and those people are truly garbage human beings. So let's move on to the next one. No one, and I mean no one, is giving your fucking kid their edibles. So please, everyone stop saying it. And if it happens, I'm just saying, you can probably blame someone who was in that household with that kid and not someone who they went trick-or-treating to. Because that shit is expensive. It's not going to happen. Next, razor blades and poison candy. So this actually does happen. But you shouldn't be worried about someone giving this to your kid. In fact, the safest place that your kid can acquire their candy from is strangers. Because every razor blade, every sewing needle, every piece of poison candy that has actually been given to a child has been given to them by their parents. Every documented case, no exaggeration. Side note, it's not a lot. It's a fraction of the percentage. It barely ever happens, but they are almost always a hoax perpetrated by a child's parents to get attention for some reason or to blame someone for doing something they didn't actually do. But that's not always the case. It's not always a hoax. And we're going to get into our first event, and we're going to just start going through some. So a child named Timothy O'Brien was a real human being that existed on this planet. And in Halloween 1974, little Timmy was 8 years old. He had just completed trick-or-treating, and he was evaluating his haul, as I think we all did. You'd sort them out. You'd be like, cool.
Dumped it all out and just
candy
sorted
corn,
through it.
throw that in the trash.
Well,
you got
I
those
like
weird
candy corn.
peanuts. No one wants to eat that.
What the hell's a candy peanut?
You're insane. And then you got like your Snickers. You might trade that, but you might just eat it right away. And Timmy decided to start eating some of his candy. And before this night was over, Timmy was dead. Some of his candy had been laced with cyanide. So who would kill an 8-year-old boy? Well, because of what I said, there's really only two suspects that you could really pick, mom or dad. And in this case, it was his dad. But why the hell would a dad kill his kid like this? Well,
Timmy was a little bastard.
In this case, wow.
No.
His dad had actually taken out a rather large life insurance policy on his son. And he did it in order to collect the money because he is a piece of garbage.
Yeah, that's a piece of garbage right there.
Poisoned
I
his
just
kid
went over
with
BTK
cyanide in his Halloween candy.
Yeah.
That's like stabbing him with a knife that burst through his fucking birthday candles while he was blowing them out. Like, just sheer joy into just death. It's horrific. All right. So do only bad things happen on Halloween? Well, no. Some good things happen too. And I'm going to tell you two of those good things before I get to the other bad things. Because I have one bad thing I really want to end on and the other ones kind of build to it. So I'm going to take a break from the bad things and go to the good things. One good thing that happened on Halloween. 1864. Civil War is going on. Guess what happens during the Halloween in 1865? Nevada became a state.
Do we get Nevada Day?
October 31st. I don't think that's actually Nevada Day. It's Halloween, but that's probably why we have Nevada Day observed so close to Halloween. Is because October 31st, 1864, Nevada was officially ratified as a state. And that's cool. During the Civil War, like I mentioned, 1864 was also an election year. The delegates from Nevada helped Lincoln get elected. And Nevada was also one of the states that helped tip the scale the next year to ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery.
Cute.
So that's pretty cool. So what else happened on Halloween that's a good thing? Well, this is really weird, and this is true. Another thing that happened isn't nearly as important as, abolishing slavery, but it's kind of awesome. 2012, basically a minute since Nevada became a state, a woman in Oregon went and bought a graveyard kit on Halloween so she could decorate. It's just something where it's like the headstone and the skeleton. And when she got home, she opened it up. There's a piece of paper inside. She opens it up, and it's a note. The note states that it's from a person who works in a Chinese factory. In this Chinese factory where this toy was made, the workers are kept against their will and tortured. They would work for 15 hours a day. They would never receive any money or compensation. They were never allowed to leave or take days off. The letter requested whoever opened the box and found the note reach out to the World Human Rights Organization. And guess what? She fucking did.
Wow.
She reached out to the World Human Rights organization. They got involved. They figured out what factory made the toy. They wound up making it to the factory. They discovered that the workers were being abused, held against their will, were not given any pay or time off, and they were freed from that factory.
Wow.
That's pretty cool shit.
That is
I have
really
goosebumps
cool.
from how cool that is. Because you would never, it's the proverbial message in a bottle.
Yeah.
Where you know it's going to get somewhere and you just hope it's someone who gives a shit. And it turned out it was. So that's your feel goods that I'm going to give you this episode. I'm about to snatch that shit right back now because it's time for the bad stuff. So what else happened on Halloween? Well, 1922, Mussolini was elected and rose to power in 1922. If you don't know who Mussolini is, he is literally the founder of fascism. He was the prime minister of Italy. He was a dictator that ruled during World War II. He was the third big ally with Germany and Japan, part of the whole group of evil. He was one of the bad guys. So that's something that happened on Halloween. There was also a trick-or-treater in 1957. This is a real case. A husband and wife had just retired for the evening after giving out plenty of candy to the kiddos. Having just laid down, their doorbell rang. Ding dong. For whatever reason, the husband decided he was going to get up and give out more candy. Now, if my patio light is off and I am in bed, go to the next house, kids. I'm not giving you shit. All I have for you are toothbrushes and scowls if you make me get out of bed. But not this guy. You don't even have
toothbrushes.
We have some extra toothbrushes to give out. I would find a toothbrush, or I'd give them my toothbrush and be like, get the hell off my porch. Or I might just egg them. So this guy gets up. He grabs his bowl of candy. He probably shrugs his shoulders, puts on a fake smile to be nice to the kid, and he opens the door. But there was not a kid standing there. There was an adult standing there in a mask, which is instantly creepy. An adult standing on your doorstep after you've gone to bed wearing a mask, and he was not holding a bag of candy. He was holding a gun, which they shot, killing the husband. Wow. Husband was murdered on his doorstep. The person ran away. They eventually investigated and found out what happened. So why would someone do this? Well, in this case, it was because of an affair. Not the husband's, though. The wife's affair. The wife had been having an affair with a lady who decided she wanted her all to herself.
Wow.
So, and here's the other part of this that's kind of weird, is she decided she wanted to possess the wife, so she sent her girlfriend. She didn't go do it herself. She was like, hey, this other chick I'm into, go murder her husband because I want her to myself. So her girlfriend showed up, killed her girlfriend's mistress's husband, which for him sucks. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, that is just wow.
So that's a bummer.
It's a web of lies,
story, right? So what else do I got? Well, Halloween 1977. A 1-year-old. This one's messed up. A 1-year-old named Nema Louise Carter was in her home. It's a 1-year-old with her parents, with the house locked down for the night. And at some point, one of the parents got up and went to check on the little girl, and she could not be found. She vanished, and they had no idea. There was no sign of forced entry, and the community was stunned by this abduction. They looked all over for this missing child. She was found 1 month later in a refrigerator in an abandoned house in the community, and she was dead. The parents took a lie detector test to clear themselves because they were the primary suspects. After that, the primary suspect was the little girl's babysitter.
What the F?
They theorized that she must have somehow snuck into the house during the day, hid in the closet, and waited for the family to go to sleep before abducting the child and stashing her within a refrigerator. And that's not the end of this one either. The year before this happened, 2 twin girls went missing. They were found sealed in a refrigerator. One of them died, and the other one survived. And the surviving child identified who it was that kidnapped her and her sister. Their babysitter, which was the same fucking girl.
What?
And despite the fact that she was identified the year before as the person who had kidnapped and led to the death of one of these girls, she was never charged. And somehow the next year got another fucking job as a babysitter and did the exact same thing.
What a sick fuck.
It took them years to bring charges against this girl for doing it the second time. She was eventually taken to trial, found guilty, given a life sentence. She never admitted guilt and still insists that she didn't kill the kid she was tried for. but she never talks about the other kid that she was like fingered and like told like she's the one who did it, that she never went to trial for it. They don't bring her up to her. And here's a crazy one from my state that I came from, Indiana. October 31st, 1963. So Halloween of 1963. There was a Holiday on Ice skating event in Indianapolis.
Oh, God. Freak accident? Freak accident with the blades?
The skaters were doing their whole thing, and the audience watched in delight. It was supposed to be a wonderful night, but unbeknownst to everyone in attendance that night, a propane tank had a rusted spot and had been leaking the entire time. And when I heard this, I pictured the kind of tank you attach to your grill. But nothing could be further from the truth. It was one of those big-ass propane tanks that basically, like, provide propane to a building or whatnot. So it had been leaking during this entire thing, and during the finale of the event, the gas reached a popcorn machine where the gas would ignite. The explosion destroyed the entire southern portion of the stands in which people were sitting. It ripped apart the concrete ground that it was placed on, creating a crater in the ground. People were flung across the venue, some in literal pieces from the explosion. The stands themselves were obliterated when the explosion went off. Reports had the fireball reaching 40 feet high.
What?
Some folks fell from the stands into the crater and were covered or crushed in the debris because so much had been moved and fell back down, whether it was the concrete or the stands, which is absolutely crazy. And it was claimed to this day that this was an accident. 74 people died, 400 were injured. That is an insane
mind-blowing.
accident.
I was not expecting that.
I never knew about this, and I grew up in Indiana. Never heard about it. And what was kind of funny earlier tonight is that I asked Robin what serial killer she was going to be covering, because I was wondering if there would wind up being any crossover between our stories. Because when you go through weird stuff that happened on Halloween, I was like, there's got to be a serial killer story that happened on Halloween. But she picked BTK, and she did her research. I couldn't find anything on BTK either. However, there was a murder on Halloween night on October 31st, 1981. And it was pretty horrific. I'm not going to get into the gruesome details, but it was actually a couple who were killed in their own home. Prior to being killed, they were savagely attacked by their killer. And when the killer was done with his vicious assault, he shot both of them in the back of the head, execution style, and then he destroyed their home.
Wow.
Like, it wasn't enough to kill them, then he had to destroy their home. But the really creepy part about this is weeks prior to this murder taking place, a convicted killer predicted not only that the murder would take place, but the condition that the home would be left when it was discovered. So people got freaked out when this happened, and the investigation focused heavily on this killer and how he could have done this being behind bars at the time or known about it all in advance.
He could have just been psychic.
But all avenues of inquiry would reach dead ends. The case is still unsolved to this day. The killer who predicted this horrific Halloween murder was known as David Berkowitz, the son of Sam.
What?
While in jail,
Shut up!
predicted that this murder would take place and was 100% right. And to this day, no one knows how he knew, and no one knows who the fuck did it. Absolute unsolved mystery. So I was like, I really wish you would have done the son of Sam, because it would have been just the perfect epilogue to yours. But eventually we get to cover Son of Sam one of these days. So
yeah, one of these days.
The son of fucking Sam predicted a murder from his jail cell without any like outside influence. He hadn't talked to anyone. They couldn't trace anyone that had spoken to him to figure out who did it.
That is mind-blowing.
And they knew he was there. They knew he was present in the prison the entire time too. So yeah, creepy stuff happens on Halloween. And there is more. I found a whole lot more. But maybe I'll save some of it.
So much more.
For next year. Because we'll have another Halloween. But that, my spooky friends, that is Halloween.
Wow, thanks. That was cool.
So I hope you enjoyed that. And it's been a fun episode. This was episode 99, which means next episode is the century mark. It's episode 100. So don't know what we're going to do for it. Don't know if it's just going to be another episode. Don't know if we're going to do something super special. I don't know. But all I know is it's kind of a milestone for us, and I'm very excited to get there. Robin just finished up her serial killer month, so I'm not sure. We can kind of play with it and see what we want to do, and maybe you folks can send us some suggestions for what we want to do for episode 100. Episode 104 is our 2-year anniversary, I think. I'm pretty sure, yeah. It's our 2-year anniversary of doing this show. So that one's also a very important one to us. So we're about to hit 2 big milestones. And I just want to thank you folks from the bottom of my heart. It's meant a lot that we talk about scary, creepy shit on this show. And it's somehow like turned into this wonderful supportive community that everyone has each other's back. So thank you for that. And if you want to send anything to us, you can reach out to us by sending us an email to storytime@scarish.com, going to our website, scarish.com, and clicking on Contact Us, filling out that form, or any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for the folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go on over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. It's monthly donations, and we have tiers starting at $1. There's a whole bunch of stuff you guys can check out on there. And then we have coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations, and those donations help us upgrade our studio setup, so anything helps.
We have done. This episode is the first one recorded on our new PC. I was able to read my script off my laptop like I have always done, but we had a dedicated PC to recording for the first time ever, and it's been amazing. And Wednesday, when we do our live episode, will be challenging because it'll be a bit different. But in the end, it's going to be so much better for us, and it's all thanks to you folks. So sincerely, thank you so much for all those donations. They really do help. It's not 100% paid for by listeners, but it was enough to make sure we got something that was going to fit our needs, and the rest of it we could take out of our pocket, basically. And we would not have been able to do that without you folks. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that's everything that we have for episode 99. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye.